Heather,
Yes. Hey, Carrie.
this is Karen Brady at
Oh, hi,
ODFW.
Karen.
I'm on the phone. I can't do the chat, but just wanted to let you know I'm on.
Awesome.
My number is an 831 number.
Okay, thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Mhm.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for logging on. Looks like we've got 13 people. We're going to be getting started pretty shortly. Thanks for being patient. We have people still trickling in and getting seated. So we'll get going here in just a minute. Actually, do you want to do that again? So are you guys hearing that online okay?
I want to do both mics.
Yeah.
Test first mic. Welcome to Patriot.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, thanks. One more.
Second mic. It's so wonderful to live in Astoria, Oregon. I'm the fourth generation Oregonian. Let's give it applause for Oregon.
You guys online hearing that okay?
Wait, let me say it again.
I think we're good.
Right? My name is Suzanne Weber. I am the representative for House District 32, half of Tillamook County, Clatsop County, part of Washington County, sliver of Columbia County, and one household in Yamhill County. when people talk about redistricting, that's one of those pitfalls for redistricting is one household in one county. So good afternoon. Welcome to Patriot Hall. Welcome to the roundtable discussion on offshore wind. Thank you. Can people hear me on?
Yep.
Okay. We have some wonderful people here this afternoon to present, but more importantly, we're here to listen to what you have to say concerning the offshore wind. I also want to remind you that it would really be great if you were to sign in so that we have a record of who all was here. And then there is also an extensive group of papers that have a lot of information on them, you know, who you need to contact, the Biden-Harris administration advances, wind energy commercial leasing process, and those sorts of things. Interesting reading. Okay, I am here representing the Coastal Caucus. And the Coastal Caucus is a really important group of people that are both Republicans and Democrats that want to make sure that the coast, all up and down the coast, is represented, and we work together to make sure that we bring forth the best interests of our coastal or rural families and businesses. So this issue that we're going to discuss today is of critical importance to our coastline families and businesses. And we really need to address this as a group. So this afternoon, I have some really important people here that will be speaking to it. On the end is Lori Steele. You know Lori. She's the West Coast Seafood Food Processors Association representative. We have Heather Mann. Heather is the executive director of the Midwater Trawlers Cooperative. And we have David Brock Smith from District 1, our representative in Port Orford. And we also have in the audience two representatives of our federal legislators. We have someone from Bonamici's office and we have someone from Schrader's office. So you know,
and Senator Wyden.
and Senator Wyden. So we have people that are here to listen to what you have to say. And so I'm going to turn this mic over to Lori and she can get things started. And then after she and David have their remarks, then we will listen to you.
Hey, everyone. Thank you so much, Representative Weber. And thanks to all of you for coming today. I'm not gonna make a whole bunch of comments because I get to comment all the time. Although I might come back and make more comments. I just want to kind of make a couple, and just orient us in terms of where we are in the process of offshore wind development. I'm Lori Steele. I'm the executive director of the West Coast Seafood Processors Association. We represent shoreside processing companies up and down the West Coast, including 3 companies here in Astoria. We provide hundreds, if not thousands, of year-round jobs to the local communities here. And as Representative Weber mentioned, tonight we are here to talk about offshore wind development and the potential impacts it will have. This is an issue of great concern for our commercial and recreational fisheries and our coastal communities and our marine environment. Today is an opportunity for you guys to voice your concerns, state your opinions, and ask questions and be heard by our coastal legislators here in Oregon. In terms of the process, right now, as many of you know, the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, BOEM, has published a notice on 2 large call areas, offshore wind call areas, off the southern Oregon coast. There are handouts over there that provide you a map of those call areas, as well as information about how to comment. Those comments will be accepted by BOEM through June 28th. Just on a side note, the reason we're having this meeting here in Astoria is because even though the call areas are in Southern Oregon, they are going to affect all of us. And they will certainly affect fishing businesses up here on the North Coast as well. Also on the table is a handout describing a floating offshore wind study that is currently being conducted by the Oregon Department of Energy, ODOE. This study was commissioned by House Bill 3375 last year, which was sponsored by Representative David Brock Smith. And the purpose of the study is to develop a report to the Oregon legislature that identifies the benefits and challenges of developing and integrating 3 gigawatts of floating offshore wind into Oregon's electricity grid by 2030. Public comments are being accepted now on the ODOE study and will be accepted through May 27th. And the report is due to the Oregon legislature by September 15th. So we sort of have these 2 different processes going that are both opportunities for public input. And what we anticipate is later this year, BOEM will take the currently noticed wind call areas and identify within those wind call areas wind energy areas, which then can be put up for auction for lease and development. So now is the time to speak up and have your opinions heard. This meeting and the other community meetings that we're having up and down the coast are not part of the official BOEM process or the ODOE process, but it is important to let our coastal legislators hear from their communities about this issue. And big thank you to Representative Brock Smith and our Coastal Caucus for providing these opportunities. Our input today and throughout these meetings will shape things in terms of how the Oregon State Legislature receives the ODOE report, the ODO report, and how our state interacts with BOEM as we move forward. I think a lot of us realize, at least those of us who've been involved, realize that the BOEM process is flawed. It's actually totally broken, and it doesn't include opportunities for engagement from stakeholders, the fishing industry, or affected fishing communities. It also does not consider any environmental impacts upfront. Offshore wind development has the potential to dramatically change the coastal landscape here in Oregon and along the West Coast. This goes way beyond fisheries. This will affect our communities and our environment. And there are many, many risks and unanswered questions. We have a lot of concerns, and we're looking forward to hearing from everybody here today. So what we're going to do once I turn it over to Representative Brock Smith to make some remarks is Representative Weber will moderate the discussion, and there's a microphone right there for anybody who wants to speak. Just raise your hand and then come on down to the mic, and there's no time limits. There's no sign-up sheet. I guess we'll hook you if you get carried away, but it's generally just an open discussion. I also want to just note that we are providing a virtual option. So there are several folks online who are listening, and to the extent that we can, we're gonna have some comments made from the folks online as well. And with that, thank you guys again for coming. I'd like to introduce David Brock Smith, representative from the South Coast, former chair of the Coastal Caucus, and the sponsor of House Bill 3375. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lori. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for being here, and hello to everyone that's online. As Lori said, I'm State Representative David Brock Smith. My district is on the other end of the state on the coast, from Brookings, the California border, to Charleston. And where these call areas are. It's a pleasure to be here with you all, and I want to really thank Lori and Heather for all of their fantastic work and engagement and just advocacy on behalf of our stakeholders up and down the coast. And as Lori mentioned, the Coastal Caucus is made up of bicameral and bipartisan legislators in the Oregon legislature. With me on the South Coast and Representative Weber up here on the North Coast, former Senator Johnson, and Representative Gomberg in the middle. And we're a fairly influential caucus within the legislature because of our bicameral and bipartisan nature, because we work hard to protect, really, it's not about party, but it's about geography for us and the coastal communities that are so important to our districts along the coast and their people and businesses that support them. And so, as Lori mentioned, knowing that BOEM was looking at Oregon, of course, California and Washington for offshore wind, we tried to jump ahead by writing House Bill 3375 in the 21 legislative session. As the state needed, we felt, many of us, needed to have its own process for stakeholder engagement and where the legislature should be when it comes to how the offshore wind areas, wherever they may be, we didn't know at the time, will impact our coastal communities and our stakeholders, our fishermen, our processors, and our recreational fishermen as well. And so we did pass that unanimously through the House and moved it forward. But unfortunately, and not to get partisan, but since I have an R next to my name, I didn't come with any resources. And so that is why I'm grateful for, are you ringing?
I apologize.
She's a busy woman, very busy woman. And so that's why I'm grateful for our industries and Heather and Lori and others for helping set up these listening sessions so that we can broaden the engagement. Oregon Department of Energy's engagement the resources just were within their existing budget. And so they did have 2 online meetings and then of course did an in-person meeting in Charleston. But again, with the advocacy from Lori and Heather, we wanted to come, and the Coastal Caucus wanted to come to the people. And so this is the 3rd listening session. We had one in Coos Bay at with the partnership of the Caucus Indian tribe a few Wednesdays ago. And then we had one in Newport last week, here in Astoria. Today, I'll be in Brookings in my district on Wednesday, and then we added a final one in Charleston on Thursday. That'll be live on KRWO if you want to listen in, the radio station out of Coos Bay. And I'm grateful that we're sidelining Hannity for you to chime in for that. It's critically important that you engage not only in the BOEM process, but the Oregon Department of Energy process as well. As Lori had mentioned, they're gathering that input to look at the pros and cons and the challenges associated with offshore wind. I didn't have a crystal ball, no, thinking that BOEM, when I was writing the bill, was going to pick 3 gigawatts, but I did know that the coastal transmission system could only handle 3 gigawatts. And so we figured that was, since there's no transmission in the pipeline, that was the best shot to look at the total. And just finally, I'm everything energy, environment, and natural resources in the House of Representatives in the Oregon legislature. And so I really appreciate the opportunity to listen to all of you and those people online on this critical issue that is, as Lori said, going to impact everyone on the coast. And so we need to have the input from all of you. And then we will craft a letter from the Coastal Caucus to be put in the record as well, to join all of you. And then I know that our federal delegation representatives are here, and they're very interested in your input as well through the process so that they can too engage at some point. So thank you all. Representative Weber.
Thank you. So who would like to go first? I'd appreciate it if you'd come down to the microphone so that the, folks online can hear you and see you, and give us your opinions. Let us know what you think. This is an important issue. I know that there's so much ambiguity surrounding it that, we've got an issue in Tillamook with our PUD and a transmission line to go to Oceanside. And the people that are very fearful about the transmission line going to Oceanside because they feel that there's a possibility that the wind energy is going to be transmitted on that line that's going to be built. So there's all this misinformation and misunderstanding, and I'd like to hear from you. Who's going to go first? Tell us your name, please, before you start.
Good afternoon. I'm not usually the type to go first. Yeah. Rob Sykes, I'm a fisherman, and we have a small little restaurant down here. I'm opposed to the wind farm deal here. I think it's unproven what we'll get out of it, and we have tons of environmental issues that could be a problem. Whales and other marine mammals, they're right in their migration. The marine birds, other animals, it's going to have an impact on fishermen. And talking to my buddies on the East Coast of fish, it sounds like these energy companies come in and try to strong arm, just taking grounds as they want. They haven't listened to the fishermen over there much. I think we'd be giving up a lot, and we don't know for sure what we can get out of this. So anyway, that's my 2 cents. Thanks for what we shared.
Thank you. Who would like to go next?
Why not, right?
Absolutely. Take a
I'm
chance.
kind of shy. I'd shoot from the hip, but it'd probably get embarrassing. So I'll read the letter that I sent to you, senators. I would like to express my concern with the rush for renewable energy. Wait, I'll stop. Kevin Dunn.
Thank you.
I live in Lewis and Clark. I operate a fishing vessel, the Iron Lady, and I also have a net building business. I would like to express my concern with the rush for renewable energy. I've been a fisherman for over 35 years and have operated an 80-foot trawler, shrimper, crabber out of Astoria for the last 23. I've watched many things occur in that time. The collapse of the bottom fish industry, buyback program, the rebuilding of many of our fish species, the implementation of huge areas set aside for marine protected areas, essential fish habitats, and rockfish conservation areas. These changes have come at a huge cost to us. We are now 100% accountable with onboard observers that we pay for out of our pocket, and we pay a percentage to NEMS to manage our West Coast groundfish fishery. We have a shortage of processors, and needless to say, our fuel costs are through the roof. When I wrote the letter, it was $4.55, it's $4.61 today. I made a 40-hour trip, and it was $5,600 for fuel and $2,200 for my observer. This doesn't have anything to do with wind energy, but it's just further squeeze. There have been murmurings of wave energy and wind energy for some time, off of Washington, off of Camp Rylea, and now the South Coast. The race for government funding seems to be fast-tracking this new energy resource. How does a government get to lease huge swaths of the ocean for up to 30 years? The current call areas certainly affect the South Coast and all the fishermen who fish there, recreational and commercial. I urge you to help slow this process down until more is known about the effects of the environment and the fish stocks. Please help fishermen to get a seat at the table to help make some of the decisions moving forward.
Thanks, Kevin. I'm going to ask some questions as people talk, not to put you on the spot, but just to draw a little bit more out.
Could care less.
So I'll start with you, and kind of following up on what Rob said too. You talked a lot about the costs of fishing now. There are discussions around compensation for lost fishing opportunity. Where I've found myself is that it's really difficult to put a value on that, especially considering all that you've sacrificed to get to this point. So can you talk a little bit about why, if you would support, being bought off, or why you find that there's just, if you find, as I do, that the value isn't there? That they can't possibly value what is left for your fishing livelihood and other younger captains. Well, you're not that young, but other younger captains.
So the larger issue with that is, at my age, how many more years will I be doing it? I don't know. Compensation's a tricky one. The trickle down, we employ a lot of people. The costs are just, they're killing everybody. So I can't sit here and whine to you about fuel, but we feel it tremendously. I'll be honest, throw me a big enough number and I'm out. But there are people far, far, far more invested. And their number would be different. Their answer would be different than mine. I can't tell you that I love everything associated with fishing anymore. I used to go fishing. I have someone I've never met in my life on the boat, in my refrigerator, using the bathroom, and that's my observer, and some are good and some aren't. And then, of course, the Coast Guard can pull up at any time, climb on the boat with their guns. I have been invaded as much as you can possibly be. And I don't have the joy I once had in fishing. This would just impact it more. I thought about, do I come or don't I? I'm on the North Coast. And the short story would be, I didn't really used to care. I'm not a mean person, well, some might say I am, but I didn't really care how the crab fishery did. I just worried about how the trawl fishery did. And as that's moved forward, or as I've gotten smarter or just older, boy, it's the water hose with the bubble in it. And I'm telling you, if the shrimpers don't have a good season, it impacts the trawl season. If the crabbers don't have a good season, every single thing impacts me one way or another. And I realize it more than I ever had. Compensation, I don't know if I have a good answer for you. I don't know that BOEM's going to play by any kind of rules if they get to make the book. But I'm here for the public record.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Were you going to add something, Dan?
Yeah, thanks a lot. I wish you would have asked that question when I was up here.
Sorry.
I've thought a lot about this, and what about the next generation? And when I look around this town, I see a ton of homeless people, these fishing jobs are good family wage jobs that, I've made a good living. I've had to work hard, but it's been a good living, even through all these changes that Kevin's talking about, And these jobs go away. What's it going to be replaced with? And down in Morro Bay, we got this wind thing going on, and they had all these fiber optics cables. The attitude that, well, I'm almost about ready to retire, I'll just take the check. What about the next generation? Somebody has to compensate those guys, because they got a tough road ahead of them, and they're going to need all the options available that I've had. That's what sustainability is all about, making sure the next generation has the same shot that we do. That's the way I see it. So anyway, that's a good question. And even though all these, they're going to put them down in the South Coast, all those fishermen are going to have to come up here to compete with us on our grounds. It's all the same ocean. Just because it's not in our backyard doesn't mean it's not going to impact us. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you.
Hello.
Hi.
My name is Brian Peterson, commercial fisherman and OFCC director. My problem with this whole thing, being a shrimp fisherman for 30 years and knowing that shrimp beds are where they're at, they don't move, they are where they are. And a lot of the grounds that we fish, the fish are where they are. And with wind farms, they're not there yet. So you can put them anywhere you want. I know there's people behind me that have been advocating to move these call areas offshore where they won't conflict with other user groups. And I know you can lay cable to those wind farms as far out as you want to go. And I know they can anchor those wind farms as far out as they need to be. And if you ask them why don't you move them offshore, their answer is cost. And to me, the cost of losing my shrimp ground, my shrimp bed that I can no longer fish, that's way above the cost of moving those farms west. So they need to rethink these call areas and move them west where they don't conflict with other user groups. Thank you.
Who would like to speak next? Come on up.
Good afternoon. My name is Mark Cooper. I have been involved in the fishing industry for over 60 years. I have 3 trawlers, 2 fish in the mothership whiting fleet. Right now, one of these vessels is fishing in the Brookings Call area, not unusual for this time of year. We spend considerable time in this area because it has good whiting production and low bycatch rates. 2 of my boats fish shoreside whiting out of the Columbia River and have done so since 1994. My boats that fish out of Astoria range from Cape Blanco to the south and to the Canadian border to the north. Bones has 2 call areas proposed off of Oregon. Both areas are important to trawlers. Bones charge is to get wind energy leases, not study if they are practical. I have several concerns over floating wind energy. When I first saw the call areas, I could say they were productive fishing areas and I didn't want to give them up. Even if you don't fish in these areas, you will be impacted by the boats that have to move out of them. To find new grounds, sorry, I should follow my writing. First concern, but the bones, we now, there's the individual, find new grounds affecting the boats in the area. This was my first concern, but what bothers me now is the environmental effect that wind generators might have on the California current and updrawings. Our coast is one of the 4 places in the world that have such strong updrawings, making them great places for sea life. Wind generators are going to slow the wind up for as many as 45 miles below the wind direction. And this will affect the updrawings. Many people are worried about effects of wind generators on seabirds, whales, and fish. There are studies that show transmission lines have negative effects on brown crab. We don't know how many of these lines there are going to be, but most likely these lines are all going to run through the crab grounds. The anchor systems are going to be 6 times the depth of the water. A good third going to be chain lying on the bottom. And every time a wave goes by or the wind changes directions, this chain are going to be dragged across the bottom, scouring it clean. Another concern I have is that the program goes through and it fails. Who's going to be responsible for cleaning up the bottom of the ocean? Offshore wind energy is going to be 6 times as expensive as the cheapest clean energy is. So I wonder why Bones and Department of Energy in Oregon feel this is the way to go. I believe that we need to have a writing campaign, write our legislators to give them our thoughts. I also think that the call area should be outside of 1,300 meters. Not solving the whole problem, but at least giving fishing boats their fishing grounds that they use the most. We need to slow down and study the effects of the wind on ocean conditions. I'm not sure offshore wind energy as a green energy. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have any questions or comments?
I have some comments to make, but should I go ahead?
You could if you wanted to.
I'll go here too.
Okay.
Oh, boy.
The other one.
Oh, this one? The step stool. Oh, that one. Oh, thank you. Hey, thank you. And I'm just gonna make a few additional comments, since I didn't want to take up too much time at the beginning. But I just want to say thank you again to the Coastal Caucus for, thanks again to the Coastal Caucus for hosting these meetings. Thank you for making this happen, Representative Brock-Smith. And I really, really hope that the input and the things that you hear from the community will in fact shape the path forward for Oregon. And I really hope that the input from the communities will somehow make it into the BOEM process. We, the fishing industry, the seafood industry, we do not have a seat at the table in the BOEM process. The BOEM process is not science-driven. It's not stakeholder-based. Environmental impacts are not adequately evaluated, and cumulative impacts aren't even considered until it's way too late. The first time that BOEM completes an environmental impact statement is after the grounds have been leased and the money has been spent. Permits for offshore wind development are being fast-tracked by our administration. This is a total leap now, look later approach, and it's going to be to the detriment of our fisheries, our endangered and threatened species, and our coastal communities. The fishing industry and seafood processors have been providing jobs in our coastal communities for over 100 years. These jobs are threatened by offshore wind development. The security of our fishing communities is threatened. Food security is threatened by offshore wind development. Our industry provides sustainable, healthy protein, the most sustainable and the healthiest protein on the planet with the lowest carbon, smallest carbon footprint. No other protein source can compare to us in terms of sustainability. We are already doing our part to tackle the climate crisis, and charging forward with offshore wind development without avoiding the impacts on our fisheries is totally irresponsible and very short-sighted. The industry has worked very hard to ensure sustainability of our resources, and we are stewards of the ocean. We are also essential workers. We feed the world, and we cannot be displaced. Processors are not mobile. We can't move. We're part of the infrastructure, and we cannot afford to lose our fishing fleet. BOEM has not engaged with us in a meaningful way, and we have no indication that they plan to. I fear that the call areas are simply going to become the wind energy areas. We've seen it happen in other regions. We may end up not getting any of those grounds back. Oregon has a rich, long history in fisheries, environmental conservation, and environmental stewardship. The state of Oregon has more at stake and certainly more to lose if we advance offshore wind without avoiding conflicts with our fishing industry and without fully understanding the environmental impacts. We need to make sure our coastal communities thrive, and we need the fishing and seafood industry to play a large part in that for hundreds of years to come. So thank you again, and I hope that Oregon finds a path forward that protects its fishing industry. Yeah, I got it. Hopefully the next person will be Paul.
He is.
Oh, there you go.
Hello, my name is Andrew Bornstein. I'm with Bornstein Seafoods. We're a primary processing fish company in the Pacific Northwest for the last 88 years, third generation. We have an offload station in Brookings, a fish plant in Newport, and a fish plant in Astoria. And I apologize in advance, I didn't write down and collect all my thoughts. But I guess where I want to start with, to me, I hear a lot of talk, or you see it on the news lately, of disinformation. That term being thrown around, that's what this feels like to me. The idea that these wind farms are green kind of just leaves me scratching my head. I think there's this perception, or there's this narrative going around that this is green energy, but to me, this is the 20th century mass industrialization of our ocean all over again. This is right up there with pebble mines in Bristol Bay, drilling in Anwar. This is a mass industrialization of our ocean. You look at some of the scales of these farms, these unproven farms, the ones that have been built in the North Atlantic, a cursory investigation into those does not show that they are promising. Half of them being broke down, throwing blades and oil and grease and all sorts of things right into the ocean. So, you know, obviously we're here to protect our fishing grounds. That's the obvious first reason when you're in the fishing industry, but the birds, the whales, the entire habitat. I mean, we're taking thousands of square miles of pristine habitat and we're putting mass farms on it. I don't see how this can be green in any way, shape, or form. From our point of view, from my point of view, I guess I'm going to speak for myself, this feels like huge special interest groups out in Washington, D.C. with trillions of dollars at their hands, and they just want to go do this, and it's the ultimate NIMBY form of energy you can come up with because it's not in their backyard. Heck, it's not anybody's backyard. We'll put them so far off there, you won't even see them. You won't even know they're there. There's no way, in my mind, that the net environmental benefit could be good with these wind farms. And that seems to be the only reason given why we have to do these, because we need to have a carbon-free future, which is great, but this isn't that any way, shape, or form. So.
Wait. Thank you, Andrew. Can you talk a little bit about what your company and others in the industry have done in terms of environmental stewardship? There seems to be this thought that if you're anti-wind energy, that you're not a good steward of the climate or the environment. Like me, well, my kids are older than yours, but you have young kids and you want a future for them and the environment. But I'm hoping you can just talk a little bit about some of the things that your company and others have done to be environmental stewards, and talk, why is there this divide that industry cannot also be conservationists?
Sure. I mean, the first one I always go to is, in what world does it make sense that a fisherman isn't an environmentalist and cares about sustainability? They depend on harvesting product out of the ocean every single year. So clearly they have the most vested interest of all to not over deplete the ocean and make sure that fish is there every single year. I think in Oregon, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I was raised in Northern Washington, not Oregon, but they always said the gill netters were the first people in Salem advocating about fish ladders for when they were damming the river. They were damming the rivers for green energy then. It was the gill netters who were most concerned about the salmon runs. It was them that were out there first and foremost, being the environmentalists to protect the ocean. We've gone through the buyback, we've gone through the IFQs, which is a rationalization of the fishery to, promote, to prevent overfishing. Gear innovations are constant. I mean, honestly, I'm a little younger than Kevin, but I've also been at it for a few years now too myself, and it feels like all we do is battle for this narrative that we're somehow depleting the ocean, but in fact we do have the most, the smallest carbon footprint protein there is. Honestly, it gets tiring too from my point of view that all we do is fight. We don't actually get to just do what I thought I was in the business of doing, which is just buying fish and processing fish and selling fish. It's like, that's the last thing I get to think about every day. It's more about these attacks, where they come from, whether it's, seagull poop on our docks that can shut you down, to, highly migratory species, to, you name it. It's just nothing but battling. But the fishermen and the fishing industry are the first line of defense of sustainability. They're the ones out there who are seeing it first. They're the ones bringing ocean acidification to the front to, of the point of view. So, rambling at that point. So.
Thank you.
Johnson. I'm a fourth generation Astorian, born and raised in a commercial fishing family. And it's just, this proposal, to me, just doesn't seem right. It's not the first time that we've seen an industry traded for power. When we built the hydropower system on the Columbia River, it had a disproportionate impact to the lower river communities and to commercial fishermen, and we're still paying that price. I'm not willing to make a trade for fishing jobs in our industry for power that goes to the big city or goes to California. I don't think that's a good trade. And I don't want to see that happen here on our ocean. Currently I'm involved. I own 2 small crab boat fishing boats, and they're permitted to fish up and down the Oregon coast. And what happens to my brothers and sisters down on the South Coast impacts us up here too. And we don't want to see that happen. So I would hope that our federal representatives can take that back to Washington and let them know that that's not a fair trade. That doesn't work for us. Thanks.
Thank you. You're next.
Tom Collin, Chairman of the Oregon Fishermen's Table Committee, office here in Astoria. I'm a former commercial fisherman, fished for salmon and tuna when I was a kid, and then bought a boat and fished shrimp and bottom fish trawling. The process that got us here is called the Outer Continental Shelf Lands Act. And if you read that document, you'll find that it says that in citing offshore renewable energy, they shall not interfere with reasonable uses of the ocean, such as navigation. And then the language changes a little bit, and it says that they must consider other uses like fishing. Unfortunately, that word "consider" seems to be the escape clause for BOEM, because where they shall not impede navigation is pretty firm. But with fishing, all they have to do is consider it. And the Humboldt Call area, which is down off Eureka, California, they had an area that was selected. They put it out for comments. They had 118 comments come into BOEM. Some were from wind companies saying, yeah, let's do this. But there's quite a few. Some were concerned about the whales. Some were concerned about fishing grounds. Even barge and ship traffic were, ship owners were concerned about interfering with navigation. With all the comments they got, BOEM made the decision to include the entire call area. They didn't reduce the size of it by 1 square foot. So they asked for the comments, but they did nothing with those comments. So I think we have a flawed process. And so I'm going to direct this to our federal representatives here and say, we need to change the process. It's not a fair process. We have what's called the BOEM Oregon Task Force, which has BOEM sitting in with members from the state. But that task force is to give BOEM feedback. It doesn't control. They can't veto the BOEM project. And so we have no say. If BOEM decides to move ahead with these call areas, or maybe they reduce it some, they're huge, but say they reduce them by half. Oregon has no say over whether that goes forward or not. No other agency has a say. The National Marine Fisheries Service can say, hey, BOEM, this is really important to our black cod fishermen, our groundfish fishermen, our whiting fishermen. And all BOEM has to say, and this is actual language that they used in Eureka, we considered other fishing impacts. That's all they have to say is they did it. They met their obligation by considering it. So we really need to change the language. We need to fix this authorizing language so that the fishing industry, these communities, you've heard from processors, from fishermen. There's a lot of people in this town that depend on the fishing industry. And we need to count as much as wind developers from Norway. And so we need to change the process so that the state has a say, so that other federal agencies have a say. does it just all fall to the director of BOEM to decide what wind energy gets rewarded? Thank you.
Come on down.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks to everyone that played a role in putting this forum together and the other forums along the Oregon coast. I think it's really important that these coastal communities be given an opportunity to express their feelings about wind energy and the placement of large wind farms off the coast. Just by way of introduction, my name is Phil Anderson. I've lived in Westport, Washington for a little over 50 years. I ran a charter boat operation out of there for 25, the first 25 years. I worked for the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife for 21 years and retired from there after serving as director for the last 6 of those years in 2015. I'm a member of the Pacific Fishery Management Council. I'm also a commissioner on the Pacific Salmon Commission. And I'm a commissioner on the Pacific Salmon Commission. And I'm retired. Since I was about 18, I've spent 50 to 160 days a year on the ocean. So the ocean is a near and dear place for me. I have continued to say when I first learned about the potential of these large wind farms being placed off our coast, that it represented the single biggest threat to the West Coast fishing industry of anything that I've seen in my tenure. I continue to believe that. And with that goes not only our fishing industry, but our culture and our heritage of our coastal communities, all of the countless jobs that are in those communities. And I also believe that it represents a huge threat to our marine mammal populations, particularly our orcas, humpback whales, Pacific white-sided dolphin, Dall's porpoise, Rampus porpoise, and all of those kinds of species. I've owned and operated a little small business called Westport Seabirds. I take people 40 miles off the Washington coast to look for seabirds. And I just have a hard time fathoming the damage that will be done by these wind farms to our seabird populations. So I'm not an Oregonian, never have been. Maybe I wish I would have been, I don't know. But the reason I came down here is because we're all in this together. This isn't, BOEM knows no state boundaries. They're looking at ocean call areas off the Washington, Oregon, and California coasts. They already tried one up on our central and northern part of our coast where the Quinault Indian Nation has their usual and custom fishing areas. And they're back looking at southwest part of Washington off our coast as well. The fishing community, the coastal communities need to be united in this fight more than any other fight I can think of. That's why I'm here. That's why I believe that there are no boundaries here, and we need to fight this together. As I think Andrew said, our fishing industry depends on healthy natural resources. We have to have good science in order to know what to do and how to manage our fisheries. Our trawl surveys give us that information, not only about groundfish stocks, but coastal pelagic species as well, like sardines and anchovies. Placing large wind farms off the coast of off the west coast will impact those surveys. And yeah, you can come up with different types of proxies to fill in the blanks, but the bottom line is we are going to lose valuable information that we use today to maintain healthy stocks. We all, many of us, a lot of us here in this room have been a part of the civic council process and the managing of our West Coast fisheries, and we know what it's like to have to rebuild overfished stocks. And a lot of the people in this room have paid the price in order to get us back to a point where we have those healthy stocks. It just seems unfathomable to me to believe that the Biden administration is willing to take the kind of risks with our natural resources that will result from placing multiple large-scale wind farms off the West Coast. That was page 2, so many pages, small paper. You know, access. We need, our fishing industry needs healthy fish stocks, and we need access to those fish stocks. And there's already been good testimony here tonight about the interdependence and interrelationships between different fishing sectors. Whether you're in the crab fishery, the pink shrimp fishery, or the whiting fishery, or brown bottom trawl fishery, coastal pelagic species fisheries, we all interact with each other. And let's not forget about the recreational fishing community. There's albacore fishing, there's brown fishing, there's halibut fishing, there's salmon fishing. They have a big stake in this too. And their voices need to start talking and be heard, because this is going to impact them as well. But again, that access is so important. And sometimes when I look out at the ocean, it looks like this great big massive expansive area that has no boundaries until you get out. And then you find out that there are very finite areas where there are certain species located, and that's where they are. And there are overlaps between the species. And so the access to our oceans is really important. If we close off significant portions of it, it's going to concentrate into smaller and smaller areas, which is going to make it harder and harder to now both manage those fisheries, and it's going to make it harder for people to be successful. I want to talk just a little bit about mitigation, because if there's one thing that makes my blood boil, it's the idea that we as the people that represent the fishing community and our coastal communities are willing to sell our heritage and our culture, that we're willing to sell our children and grandchildren's opportunity to access our natural resources in our oceans. It is patently, I reject the idea that any of us are willing to be bought out. And I feel really strongly about this. And I compare it, I spent a lot of time in my career at the Department of Fish and Wildlife in Washington working with Indian tribes. And when the Bolt decision, the 50-50 decision came along in 1974, there was an effort to try to settle it before it went to the US Supreme Court in 1978. And later there was the Rafiti decision that followed it that dealt with shellfish. And there were these people that believed that if we offered the tribes enough money, that they would sell their right to fish. And they over and over and over and consistently rejected that idea that they would sell not only what they have, but their future generations. And I feel the same way. It's the same thing. It's that heritage and culture of our coastal communities that someone is suggesting, not only would we do it,
But do we even have the right to do it? I don't have the right to sell off future generations access to our oceans. So I patently reject the idea that we can be bought out. I'm not interested, and I don't think very many people are. I would just close by saying, I played off a little bit of what Mark said in Newport in my comments there as well, which was, who's gonna clean up the mess when they're done? There is no proof whatsoever that they're going to be successful. There is no proof that they can spend a bunch of money and establish all this stuff over a large area of our oceans, and that it's going to be successful. And when it fails, there is going to be a mess there for somebody to clean up. And I'll bet you they're not going to be there to do it. And I just, I'm very concerned about that as well, that it's going to clean up the mess when this fails. And it may not be tomorrow, it may not be in the first 5 years, and it may be 20 years down the road, but I'll bet you wind generated electricity off in our oceans is not going to solve our energy problem on land. And there'll be other mechanisms, other ways to meet the energy demands that will make this obsolete.
Thanks. Thanks, Phil. My question is around all the years that you've spent in these different processes. Can you talk a little bit about how the BOEM process compares to like the Magnuson process, or have you ever seen anything like the BOEM process? And do you have any ideas for how we can be more successful dealing with BOEM?
Well, no, I've never seen a process like this, quite like this. I think I've seen processes where I believe that regardless what the public had to say about it, it was going forward. The decision had been made and that they were going to check the box. I don't know that I could come up with an example. You know, I could, but I'm not going to. But those of us, and there's a lot of people here that have worked with it, certainly you have worked within the under the Magnuson process of the regional councils, which I'm really proud to say I've been a part of for 35 years, because it really is an open and public and transparent process. And even though there's a lot of times I suspect when people get up and testify in front of us, they're going, this isn't going to make any difference, they're going to do what they're going to do. But I have seen time and time and time again where the public's comment have changed the direction and the decision that might have been made without it in the council. And so I'm not, so there is really no comparison between these two. There just isn't. But you know what I wonder? I wonder where NOAA fisheries. They ought to be advocating for our fisheries. They ought to be advocating and pointing out what is going to happen from a science perspective and debate that maintaining a strong base for resource management. They ought to be advocating that strong and sustainable fisheries don't get compromised. And I fear that the administration above them has told them, answer questions. You're not to be an advocate, but answer questions as you know, as posed, but don't engage in a meaningful way on behalf of the fishing industry, which to me is unforgivable. So I want to straight a bit there.
That's good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, this here. Phil is always a tough act to follow, so I will take one for the team. And I really think it's important to maybe set a minute and let folks really digest all the things that Mr. Anderson said. They were true, they were palpable, they were tangible, and they're important. My name is Dan Waldeck. I am the executive director of the Pacific Whiting Conservation Cooperative. It's a long, fancy phrase for a group of companies that own and operate catch and processor vessels that fish for Pacific whiting off the Oregon and Washington coasts. My member companies are largely based in Seattle and Tacoma. So in the vein of what Mr. Anderson said, this is a regional issue. This is not an Oregon issue, not a Washington issue, not a California issue. It's a regional issue. You are here to listen. I am here to give voice to the thousands of men and women who fish and process aboard the vessels that I represent. You are hearing truths today. You're not hearing speculation about fears, about concerns, about questions, about values. We are a fishing family based in Washington, based in Oregon, based in California. When this threat moves to Washington, and I have to speak to it for my member companies in a more direct way, I know Kevin will be next to me in that conversation, in that fight, because we are a family. We are a council family, we are a fishing family. These issues are important. The truths you have heard today have spoken to the multi-generational value of these fisheries to these people in this room, online, and who can't be here today because they're fishing right now. These jobs are important. These institutions are important. They have value. They can't be overlooked. They can't be pushed aside. We won't be pushed aside. This is important. You are here to listen. We have state representatives. We have federal representatives. We need your help. We need legislation to move the needle. We have no leverage right now in this process. You are hearing real fears from real fishermen who have invested their lives in supporting these fisheries, supporting their families, sustainability, environmental awareness, environmental consciousness. These are important things. They're truths, not speculation. They have value. They are real. We need your help. It was spoken to when Heather asked Mr. Anderson a question about process. Both state and federal fisheries management are stakeholder driven, bottom up processes. The council process, which I've been in for quite a long time now, Heather and I cut our teeth sort of as professional staff and moved on to work for industry. And that journey has been important to me. I've learned a lot, I've grown a lot through that process because I've learned from the people that I work with and work for. And I think it's important that you, as their representatives, hear the truths that they're saying today. The fears they have about displacement of productive fishing grounds. Mr. Cooper spoke to this. Right now, pretty much every at-sea processing vessel and support vessel is in the Brookings Call area, catching fish day and night, productive, clean. If they were pushed out of that area, they would be forced to fish in areas that are less productive, increasing costs, decreasing efficiency, decreasing safety. Layer on top of that, as Mr. Anderson spoke to, the fact that you're going to lose the ability to do research, basic scientific research in these areas will be disrupted because they can't navigate through these important zones. You lose, we lose those scientific time series. We have less certain data. We have lower catch limits. So we have fishermen who, as Kevin and others have spoken to, are bearing enormous costs because this is what they do. This is what they care about. They're investing in this multi-generational fishery because it's important. Those costs are being borne, and they do that because that's what they have to do.
But if you decrease the productivity of the fishing grounds that they're able to access, and you increase the uncertainty of the science that goes into annual catch limits, there's less fish to catch. There's less fish to catch. They're forced to fish in less productive areas. Costs go up, safety goes up, safety goes down, sorry, right? These are truths. This is not speculation. These are truths, absolutes. So I'll finish with again, thank you, Representative Weber, and thank you, Representative Brock-Smith, for listening to us. Please hear us and take these messages back to your partners and develop legislation that we need to move that needle. And I say this too to your federal colleagues. We need federal legislation. Urgent, because there's no leverage.
Question.
Thanks, Dan. My question is, you're really thoughtful and thinking about everything that's been said. What's my question? What I was thinking of, oh yeah, so there's this narrative now that the concerns that fishermen have, whether it's about losing fishing grounds or impacts to whales or species, there's this new phrase going around, well, caps kill more birds than wind turbines. Can you kind of put that into perspective, because you're thoughtful about things like this, in terms of, that narrative? Climate change is so bad that whatever is coming is nowhere near as bad. Can you talk about that a little and what your perspective is there? Thanks.
Sure, and I think, full disclosure, we bought an electric vehicle recently. I'm raising my kids in Southeast Portland. We're probably the most liberal people that you're going to run across in your day-to-day lives. Alternative energy is important. Finding ways to reduce our carbon footprint is important. Putting wind farms, total speculation, onto productive fishing grounds without understanding the environmental impacts that will certainly result from those things. The immediate impacts to birds, marine mammals, sea turtles, we don't know what those are. We've not studied them in an effective way. As folks have mentioned, the bone process is diametrically opposed. It's upside down to what we do with fisheries. Before we do anything in fisheries, we analyze it to the nth degree to understand what those environmental impacts will be, what the costs and benefits of those management measures will produce. Bone does not do that. We don't know what impacts there will be on marine mammals, on seabirds, on turtles, on other protected resources, but we know they're going to happen. Those aren't speculation. And I think, Mr. Anderson made the point too, these wind farms are a form of speculation. We don't know if we're going to be able to bear up under 50-foot seas in the middle of winter off Southern Oregon. We don't know that. They've not documented that. We don't know if they're going to be productive in terms of decreasing our dependence on fossil fuels. That's speculation. We don't know if once they're no longer useful, we don't know how they're going to get those giant structures out of the ocean. That's speculation. So all of those things, all of those potential benefits are unknown. The costs are unknown and are being spoken to by all these people. And the people who aren't in the room today, conservation folks, NGOs, are becoming more and more aware and becoming more and more engaged. It's happening on the East Coast with Conservation Law Foundation getting together with fishermen out there. And the message to all fisheries is, and I think you heard it today, and I wanted to speak to this, is we need more time. We need more time to understand what the impacts are and to engage in a meaningful way. And the process right now doesn't allow for that. So again, I go back to what I said. We need leverage, and that leverage is going to come through legislation. Otherwise, we don't have it.
Thanks.
Thank you.
I'm Kurt Ingram with Ingram Marine Supply, probationer in Astoria.
customer is a commercial fisherman, you know, so recreational fishermen and other industries. We've got stores along the coast from Westport, Washington, down to Eureka, California. Plus, we have a life raft servicing shop here in Warrenton. And so, you know, here today representing the various support industries that, you know, we hear a lot about these fishermen and processors mainly here today. There's also another layer underneath that of support industries like ourselves. And I think all too often, the fisheries, or each individual fishery as a whole, is valued by its ex-vessel price. You know, they even our own magazines, trade magazines, ex-vessel value here and there. Well, that's just where the money starts. I mean, there's a huge economic multiplier. You don't hear the forest industry value themselves on the price of a log, on a log truck. They value the whole value added, the whole process involved. So with that, there's a huge economic multiplier, and that's where industries like ourselves come in. Again, there's us, go down the list, there's shipyards, boatyards up and down the coast, the various trades, you know, part of Kevin Dunn's business, he's a net builder for other people. There's mechanics, welders, fiberglass people, painters, I mean, on down the line, special OEM, you know, manufacturers, craft blocks and different things, specialty manufacturing, craft pots, things like that. And of course, the merit goes on down the line to the rest of our communities as well. So I just want to make sure that, you know, this goes well beyond this first fishermen and processors, it goes all the way through the whole coast virtually, and the region. And a lot of that money spent throughout the Northwest that's generated by the fishing industry. So that's the main point on that. And then also just from a personal view, taxpayer view, it doesn't make sense. We're wasting our money for something that may or may not work. We're putting a successful industry. We're gambling with that to displace that for energy is going to be very expensive and likely not going to turn out. And we're all paying for it as taxpayers. We're going to pay for this. We're paying for the process now, but goes through, we're going to pay for all the infrastructure. If it fails, we're going to pay for it to clean it all up. So that's another thing I think we need to keep in focus as well. Thank you.
Come on down.
Good evening. My name is Trent Hartel. I work for American Seafoods. We participate in the at-sea whiting fishery. I wanted to touch on a couple things. The scale and the scope on the short term and the long term of the impacts of a potential wind farm. So the whiting season just opened a couple weeks ago. Our boats left the Wanateka Strait, steamed down the coast for a couple days looking for concentrations of whiting and clean fishing. Right now, all of our boats, and as Dan said, most of the whiting fishery is fishing in that Brookings Call area. If that call area were to preclude those vessels, preclude the whiting fishery from participating there, there's certainly some impacts. For our company, it would be the cost of the fuel to steam down there, to look for other fishing areas. There would be increased production costs. There would be impacts on other species. You know, one of the key things that we have to do to run a profitable economic operation is avoid binding bycatch limitations. And so there's a constant balance for looking for clean fishing. If we can't be operating in areas that have clean fishing, then it's going to take time and fuel, and that's going to come at an increased carbon emission. Increased carbon emissions is going to come at increased bottom line to our operations. This is important because the current BOEM permitting process does not have a mechanism in it to evaluate these impacts, not only to our operations, but also to the species that are occurring in that area. So one thing that could be very helpful in this process is that there was an environmental impact statement that was developed prior to siting and permitting the wind farms. That would provide a mechanism to account for the increased cost to the fisheries, increased impacts to protected and endangered species, impacts to recreational fisheries, impacts to local communities. It would also consider the impacts and trade-offs for wind farms. This is a federal project, and all federal projects have a standard for when they impact the environment. And that standard is an environmental impact statement. This process does not have that until the wind farms are sited, they're in place, and the impacts have already occurred. So we need, as Dan spoke to, the leverage to be able to have all of these impacts accounted for, analyzed, and considered before siting these wind farms. So I'll leave you with that. Thank you.
Thank you. Next. Come on down.
Hi there, my name is Walter Trump. Participated in this endeavor over the last 14 years, along with some of the people here in the room, Scott and Colin, Kevin, and other areas. I'm also a member of the Bone Task Force, so I'm the only one here and I can come and speak to that a little bit. As representatives, Weber and Smith, I just want you to know that OWW and DLCC have done a really good job providing information to Bone. They are hampered by being state agencies. They really can't put their personal take on this, but they've been very, very good. And all this information, everyone here has been saying that Bone has been ignoring, they have been giving that information, so I can tell you that with a straight face. The task force is very daunting. I'll just tell you right now, there's only 9 local elected officials, and you have to be an elected official to be on there. There's 7 county commissioners, 1 city official, and 1 pro commissioner myself. There's 4 tribal representatives, 14 state agencies, and 21 federal agencies on there. So see, we're a little bit outnumbered. A lot of this consternation came up when they released the call areas. We participated for 2.5 years in good faith, giving all this input along with the state agencies, and we did not learn about the call areas until 18 hours before our last meeting. When I sent that out, along with some of their task force and stuff. Inboxes were very full in a very short amount of time. During that time, all of us, agency people and local elected officials, we participated in good faith for 3 years. We gave our concern, provided maps, time and meetings, only have basically that all ignored when the call areas were dropped. I was also part of other presentations, probably under half a dozen for other entities. I just have you ask that BOEM engage with Oregon and use the information provided by commercial and recreational fishermen, DLCC and OSU, OAW, and consider current and traditional users and avoid impacts to these sustainable industries. With offshore winds. Thanks.
Want to try an online? Want to try an online?
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. Carrie, we're gonna give you, or Christine, I'm sorry. If you're there, we'll try.
Okay, can you hear me?
Hold on, I'm gonna put the microphone by the computer. Okay, go ahead.
Are you able to hear me?
Can you guys hear that? Go ahead.
Thank you for the very personable way in which you have invited the public input. This feels very natural and comfortable. I am the mother of 3 children and 3 grandchildren. I am a certified public accountant and an early developer of ecological economics as a way to understand the climate responsibilities upon us and accounting for our common resources. I want to talk about the distributive justice of deploying this first wave of wind energy projects to our undeveloped rural coastlines. Our coastline is like a nature preserve. We do so much with the environment to restore salmon habitat. In addition, we have sacrificed with experimental limits to our fishing harvest in order to support a healthy fishery. And now you want to render that entire focus on conservation as secondary to wind energy development? Our forests come right up to the ocean, and we will be asked to keep those forests standing as the North American carbon sink. As a certified public accountant, we are taught that dishonorable actions are nearly always a result of unrealistic expectations. We cannot simultaneously embrace being the steadfast protectors of habitat and the promoters of alternative energy and carry a major role in decarbonization efforts by way of a standing forest forever. We do so much for the environment that experimental wind energy projects are counterindicated. Please, BOEM, don't be so crude as to open this historic West Coast fisheries to this current interest or to any interest. Our environment and the rural people who protect it are part of our national security. We need this social diversity for our national resilience. Please don't be responsible for setting precedents for overruling local control and our shoreline management plans. Don't be the trigger for displacing people and breaking down the community unity. I showed up when BOEM was advocating for offshore drilling. Please stop disrupting community. I am the mother of 3 Native American children. We teach our children to be brave. They are risk-taking, multi-skilled people, sometimes cooperative, yet fiercely competitive. These are just a few things that we have nurtured in our children. Precisely, my children are providing you with cybersecurity. Another is the director of the Washington State Bar Association. And another is living appropriately here, foraging in the forest. This cultural diversity is important to our national resilience and deserves protecting with aggressive, proactive policies and programs to prevent displacement. Our sustainable local control will serve to protect our pristine shorelines from unwanted development. Displacement can be slow and undetectable until it is too late. We will not give up on having a vibrant fishing community as our future. In the meantime, whatever disruptions we are forced to accommodate should be accompanied with a redoubling of our pride in being a people who work with nature. We must include mitigation and create jobs that restore and protect nature as part of our best future. I appreciate the new faces and leadership in your offices. Please create files of our various communities so that we can establish the historic significance of our region. Thank you. And thank everybody for sharing all your great thoughts.
Thank you very much. Who would like to speak next?
Hi, everyone. So I'm just learning about this last week when they planned to have this. I'm a 4th generation Oregonian, as I told everyone before. I have 3 grandchildren. I have a 5th generation daughter who is an attorney in Washington, D.C. I haven't told her about this because I just learned about it. And we have I have 3 grandchildren. My husband is a professor of physics here at Clatsop Community College. And we were just reading an article this week about polar bears and the noise pollution that's being caused by the drilling. And they're searching to see if these bears are underweight and if they're abandoning their dens. So one of the questions I'm having as I'm listening is, what is this noise going to do to the environment? And I also noticed that we don't have any physicists and we don't have any biologists that I was able to read anything about in everything that's placed out here. So for me, this seems like this has gone a long way forward without some of the people knowing what's happening. And another thing that came to my mind is, who gets the money from this? What is this doing? And then I'm just gonna share a little thing, because I don't know that much, I'm just saying, I'm just like, what's happening here? Is that my husband said, and he couldn't speak, he's not here, and he said, wow, that he's been doing this, he's been teaching for 30 years, and he said about 20 years ago, he had a group of people talking about green energy. And somebody was there from Eastern Oregon, and they're talking about this energy, about getting the energy from what we're doing with these turbines. And my husband said that what we're doing out here is like putting a ladder on top of a ladder and a step stool on top of a ladder to try and get the energy from these turbines out here. And 20 years ago, we talked to someone from Eastern Oregon who was getting energy out of this creek. He said that my husband said there's a lot easier ways to get energy than what we're doing. And that's all I'm saying. Thank you.
Thank you. Come on down.
My name is Trisha Dunn. I'm a fisherman's wife. Most of us don't come up and talk because we hear everybody speak and they have all the committees they're on and all the jobs they do. But I'm sitting here listening to this, and there is one thing I can speak about, is that this threatens the livelihood of the fishermen, which threatens our way of life, which, you know, we have kids, we have a child, and that when you, I'm sorry, I'm nervous. When you threaten the way of life, that's scary to a mother. And so I wanted to stand up and say that this isn't okay to take away their fishing grounds. Thank you.
Thank you. Who would like to speak next?
My name is Michael Kineski, and I'd like to thank you for attending this listening session. I have a huge amount of respect for some of the people here, especially Phil Anderson. I worked around him a long time, and it was pretty moving what he said. Lori Steele, I respect the heck out of too. Dan Waldeck, he was my mentor when I started the CPS process. Heather got me involved in that. Still haven't gotten over it. But I'm a fishery consultant with Pacific Seafood. I began my career with Pacific in Warrenton in 1994. I worked 25 years for Pacific as a plant and regional manager, along with sales and fishery policy work. I'm still active on 3 Pacific Fishery Management Council subpanels, plus multiple fishery committees. I've worked a total of 53 years in the fishing industry in all 3 West Coast states, Alaska and Canada. Pacific Seafood has locations of plants, not close enough. Sorry, thank you. Pacific has locations of plants in Oregon on the coast, in Warrenton, Newport, Charleston, Brookings. I ran the Charleston plant and I ran the Warrenton plant. I love that work. I really did enjoy it a lot. My primary work the last 3.5 years has been offshore wind energy. I began focus on offshore wind energy after attending a presentation at New England Science Center. I later had dinner with the NOAA Fisheries chief scientist. He cautioned me that industry needed to pay close attention to offshore wind energy development. He said preliminary Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, BOEM, targets were for 10,000 plus turbines, approximately 150 gigawatts, and over 10,000 square miles of ocean. The Oregon State Legislature has passed legislation promoting 3 gigawatts by 2030, but the area BOEM laid out recently would accommodate 18 gigawatts. This is just the opening salvo. The major conflict of offshore wind versus fishing and the achievement of credible environmental review is that BOEM has no solid answers for scope and location of projects or for transmission of power to shore. Most shore-side power grids are locally short. BOEM only does a minimal and incomplete environmental assessment prior to leasing. They claim to execute a more thorough national environment policy act, NEPA review prior to construction. But by then, billions of dollars may have been collected. The likelihood of avoiding the project at this point seems incontestable. This process makes it impossible to analyze the cumulative impacts to the fishing industry and the ultra-productive California current ecosystem. A valid NEPA programmatic environmental impact statement, PEIS, must be done prior to conducting any business activity that supports both construction and a pre-established result. BOEM's NEPA process is flawed, incomplete, sequentially reversed, and tailored to a predetermined outcome. It cannot be deemed an objective and unbiased process. Additionally, there needs to be individual project EISs before construction begins on each individual wind farm. This is warranted as developers will employ different equipment and methodologies. BOEM plays by their own rules. They are not accountable for their actions. They use a warped variant of NEPA of their own design. They have only superficial check-the-box exercises for public engagement. This special exemption process allows little or no opportunity to change their plans to industrialize and privatize our oceans. There is no estimate of the total impacts to our fisheries and environment after all the construction projects are completed. In addition, NOAA survey ships and other oceanographic vessels will no longer be able to survey the areas occupied by the wind farm structures and cable layouts. This will leave a paucity of fishery and environmental data. I briefly touch on the impacts to fishing because it is really a simple equation. If BOEM grants leases of large-scale areas to build wind farms where fishermen presently fish, it will no longer be possible for most vessels to fish in those areas. Rex Leach stated, the two call areas off Southern Oregon is where he has caught 70% of his harvest over the last 40 years. Remove fishable real estate and you remove the fishing industry. We heard a fisheries scientist state in Coos Bay at an industry rally, wind provides necessary energy that supports ocean life. Areas with the highest profile of wind velocities are often the most productive waters the ocean has to offer. Wind impacts energy into the ocean that triggers a number of hydrological dynamics, which fosters upwelling. This in turn brings nutritional elements near the surface and is the platform for California currents productivity. The California current is one of the most productive in the world. This supports the tiniest form of plankton to 100-ton blue whale. We do not know exactly what impacts may occur to ocean ecological systems without more research and analysis. But studies in the North Sea indicate there are reductions in wind energy levels in the lead of turbines. Features called wind waves change ocean hydrology. There's an article, Messing with the Environment to Fight Climate Change. Wind farms are altering the North Sea. This is by P. Jacqueline, February 26, 2022. Study of the effects of wind turbines by Huron. It's a German company. Here's some observations. First off, wind farms are altering the North Sea. Wind turbines pose obstacles to water and air. Turbines weaken the wind as they extract kinetic energy to generate electricity. These are characterized by reduced wind speed. The wind speed deficits can propagate up to 70 kilometers, about 43 miles behind wind farms. This in turn could affect the horizontal currents and stratification of the water. The changes in flow and mixing are likely to affect plankton production and food system and may influence how protected areas work. That's pretty important stuff that is not being looked at. at all by BOEM. It's just damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead. That's all we heard from day one, 3.5 years. Where do we go next? The fishing industry needs to stand united on the offshore wind energy issue. We need to be vocal. We need to win public sentiment and make politicians aware of our plight. Some environmental groups are now expressing the same concerns for ocean productivity. We have stood with them on one letter and we may do more. If we don't win this battle, our oceans will be sold to the highest bidder, which will likely have its headquarters in a foreign country. Please make this known to your politicians at all levels. There are better ways to combat climate change. Thank you.
We've got some online.
May I-
Okay, okay.
Yeah, and then we'll go.
Just one.
Sure.
I haven't had time to really look at the Coast Guard interactions. I know Mr. Dale Beasley has done quite a bit there. And just that our company and the people I work with in another organization called West Coastal Atlantic Conservation Group, we very fully support its efforts to work with the Coast Guard. It's very important for our safety at sea. So thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Javity?
Hello, my name is Cyrus Javin, hoping to represent this district in the upcoming session as a representative. I just wanted to, I came up from Tillamook today, been doing some research. Scott reached out to me and gave me a heads up. I'm concerned, deeply concerned about what's going on with this proposed plan to put these windmills out into the ocean. In my backyard, we have a little creek that runs through it where salmon come up to spawn. And I'm prevented from cutting down a single branch because it might affect where those salmon come back to. So the idea that we're going to put giant windmills, wind farms out into the fishery without any impact on the fish seems like a hypocrisy to compare to what I have to do in my own backyard. So a little bit of research I did said that 0.1% of energy comes from these wind farms. And then the research that's been done shows mild to moderate impacts on fisheries around the world. Yeah, we haven't had really any peer-reviewed research done in the United States on fisheries that are important to our local economy. So I'd like to see some of those tests and research done. I think the increase, this is like one of the most expensive ways to generate energy. So I'm wondering what the impact's going to be on retail energy costs in homes across the communities if we start relying more on wind power. Some estimates have it not even being affordable until 2050, so it seems like we're 30 years kind of ahead of the curve here. Like was pointed out, a lot of this money is flowing out of the country, funded by taxpayers because governments are the only people right now rich enough, or maybe dumb enough to spend money on something unproven like this. So I'd like to see some more solutions. I'd like to see, my recommendation would be banning this for a period of time, 10, 15 years. Let's get some real long-term studies done to see what the effects are going to be before we commit lots of resources, devastate potentially fisheries and economies that have been in place for hundreds of years. Thanks.
Thank you.
We've got a couple comments online that we're going to go to. I've got Larry Thievick and then Kelly Rutherford. Larry and Kelly, I'll ask you to really speak up. There's some background noise that started here that sounds like a gigantic wind turbine about to break loose. So Larry, go ahead first, please.
Yeah, can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. First of all, I really want to mention my appreciation for the heartfelt and knowledgeable comments and truths that have been offered by so many speakers tonight. My name is Larry Thievick. I'm the president of the Washington Dungeness Crab Fishermen's Association. I'm a member of the Washington Coastal Marine Advisory Council, the Washington Coastal Crab Advisory Board, and the Pacific States Tri-State Crab Committee. I actively fished for 45 years in multiple fisheries from California to Alaska. As we all have learned, actions occurring off of one coastal state usually have impacts in all states. Some cases, the impacts occur in big ways, but always in some way. Offshore wind development carries multiple impacts, which will affect all of the coastal states collectively in big ways. The development of offshore wind and the amount of ocean space to displace for proposed project development will have significant, long-lasting, and far-reaching impacts on fishing communities, support industries, and other species that share ocean space with us along the entire West Coast. What we have also learned is BOEM has little knowledge or care to understand potential negative impacts prior to leasing. BOEM continues to proceed with a permit process that leases first and asks questions later. Fishers, other stakeholders, and concerned members of the public must insist BOEM conduct more thorough environmental reviews of adverse impacts at project level and at cumulative level prior to leasing, and must do so in order to meet BOEM's professed goal to develop offshore wind on the OCS with minimal or no impacts on existing uses or the ocean environment. From an industry perspective, there is a deep and well-founded concern by many of us over the displacement of existing uses and denial of access to ocean space. The economic disruption from dislocation can be severe and cause fishers, fishing communities, and fishing support industries to fail. A BOEM lease grant of public space for private and often subsidized development will be especially egregious and arbitrary if granted on the basis of cursory environmental assessments with limited scope and limited analysis of environmental and stakeholder interest and impacts. BOEM needs to slow down. The disparity between data gaps and analysis and what seems a predetermined decision timeline for BOEM action continues to haunt this present process and deeply concerned stakeholders and members of the public. The cumulative effects of multiple offshore wind developments at scale and expected range of displacement and effects on present ocean uses, on marine and avian species, and potential impact on upwelling, nutrient distribution, and the California current system are simply unacceptably missing in action in BOEM's present lease process. And I look to those in attendance at this meeting who have much to say about public policy, that they will, in the capacity that they have, demand that BOEM begins to truly honor their stated purpose to try to locate, if there are going to be projects located, in ways that understand the environmental impacts that they bring before they're placed. And thank you for your time and for everybody else's participation.
Thanks, Larry. I will just add that this is being recorded. So if anybody online or in the audience is having a difficult time hearing these, the tapes from this session and our Newport session last week will be made available online. Let's go back to Kelly Rutherford is up next.
Thank you, Heather. First of all, I wanted to thank the Coastal Caucus for giving the people a voice, those representing our local legislators. Our livelihoods are not for sale or lease, and this process proves this. Thank you for being willing to listen and also for being willing to act. Hi, I'm Kelly Rutherford out of Newport, Oregon. I represent our family's fishing fleet. We all together equal 21 members of the family, 3 generations, not including the extended family members. Each member of this family, minus the 5 little grands, play a part in our family business. The women work behind the scenes and also alongside their husbands to maintain the vessels. We all know how to use paintbrushes, clean boats, and help with offloads and everything in between. This is our life, and we take pride in it. Our days are 7 days a week. Our hours are many, tons of calls and battling just to maintain as small family businesses. The West Coast fishing fleet is some of the hardest working people on this planet. And as a fleet, the fleet is a family. We go from one border to the other. We share the same oceans. We share the same grounds. We share the same fisheries. And these are some of the hardest working men and women out there. It breaks my heart as a wife and mother to watch the sacrifices that my husband and family goes through to provide seafood, and not just locally, but to the world through the processing distribution. As a fishing family, I've spent years in the rebuild process through crab pot reduction, buyback programs, individual fishing quotas, full retention, and the list goes on and on. We call on our legislators and our coastal caucus to require BOEM and ODOE to the standards that have been set before us as an industry, to uphold and maintain our oceans, our fish stocks, and the sea life in between. So now some of the other issues. What about the navigational safety, environmental safety, shipping, and social justice? These are all affected. Please, I ask you all again to act. See the full picture, protect us, the community, the fisheries, our oceans. This is our Oregon, our Oregon. This isn't just a coast problem. We feed Oregon, we feed the world. And remember my voice, it will not be silenced. This is a voice of a mother. And when you look out to sea, the fishing vessels on the oceans, there are sons, there are daughters, there are grandsons, and our great-grandchildren and their family who feed your families, not just boats at sea. So I just ask, as all of Oregon, that we can come together to find a better solution than just sticking out the wind energy, and that we will have a better opportunity to try to make sense of all of this together as we slow down this process. So thank you for listening. Thank you for all that attended that meeting up there and all that are involved in this process. And thank you that you lifted your voice and made a difference today. Thanks, Heather.
Thanks, Kelly. Thank you. Would you like to get up and say something? I'd appreciate it. I know you spend a lot of time preparing.
This is what always happens when I get before a microphone. I forget about what I was think about what I heard. Does that work? Stand right on. My voice is terrible. So, my name is Dale Beasley. I'm a fourth generation commercial fisherman. I retired after 45 years of chasing fish all over the ocean from San Francisco to Kodiak. I'm currently president of the Columbia River Crab Fishermen's Association and a coalition of coastal fishermen. My voice is speaking out for thousands of fishing families depending on both the sea and the shore. Kurt England mentioned earlier today about how many people on shore are dependent upon fishing. You don't really think about that. This is in my prepared remarks, but I trawled for 12 years. The day I quit trawling for a local fish company, 50 people lost their jobs at that fish plant that day. I was the last fisherman fishing that could bring any amount of fish into that plant to keep those people on their job. I fished a lot of tough weather. We broke the windows out of the boat more than once trying to feed those people. I didn't have to be there on those kind of days. I was making plenty of money to feed my family. I didn't have to be there. And I did it because of those people on shore that I was supporting. I fished a lot of days I didn't want to fish, and I didn't have to fish. I did it for other people. Like somebody said here earlier today, it broke my heart when I quit.
this offshore wind community to the northwest. It's gonna be a lot of pain for our communities and not much gain. Okay? Got to keep that in mind. Home is a broken process. Heard that here today. I was sitting here by one of our congressional groups here today. We're gonna have to go to Caucus, get this process fixed before we lose our communities, and that will happen. Right now, we only have a couple of call areas down in southern Oregon. We've got a proposal on the county line in Grayson City County up here, just above here, where all of the fishermen from Oregon and Washington fish out of this Columbia, fish back and forth across. There's no state boundaries. The ocean doesn't have a line out there other than the fact that somebody behind the desk someplace draws one. This broken process that BOEM is putting before Oregon and Washington, fish dependent families, it's going to be a major social train wreck for our coast. It'll be transformational national policy, terrifying future prospect to put people on welfare. We're just not going to be able to make a living when all of this gets done. You've got to remember, this is just the beginning. U.S. Department of Energy is predicting 110,000 gigawatts of energy in the ocean before this is by 2050. That's only 30 years away. A lot of you here alive are going to still be alive. I probably won't. But just think about it. They're talking about 3 gigawatts here in Oregon. Put that in perspective to 110 by 2050. This won't be the last time somebody comes here and wants more ocean of our fishing communities. It'll be a steady train once this gets started. And if you look at where we're going, a lot of this is going to be foreign money. First 2 ocean energy facilities to go in are going to be owned by foreign companies. Block Island, Rhode Island is now 100% owned by foreigners, and Vineyard Power has got a lot of foreign money in it too. I spent a lot of years trying to get the foreigners thrown off of our coast. I don't know how many trips I made to Washington, D.C. trying to protect fishing. Magnuson Act put limits out to 200 miles so that we could have fishing area for our people on our coast. I worked with people from Rhode Island, Massachusetts, all over the country, trying to get that done. So fishermen would have a place to fish without foreign interference. And it's coming back in a different form, which is being displaced in a different manner. And when we fought for this, I've got a letter from Senator Max written in 1974. And he says, 2 things we're fighting to get this EEZ put in place for: to stop the depletion of fish and stop the depletion of fisheries. That's not going to happen. You displace these people, they will be depleted. There'll be a lot of pain in them. Unfortunately, the way I'm going here, I'm not going to get much of this covered, but I did give Mr. Brock Smith 14. I don't know how many pages I gave you, maybe close to 20 pages of 16 comments. Well, I got to tell you, that's a mini paper from what I'm working on. I've got another paper I'm working on, it's 160 pages long already, and it's not ready for publication, but we'll be giving that to Rome. And as soon as they open up Caucus back east, and we can go back and actually do some work back there, I'll be on the first plane back after that Caucus opens up, trying to protect these fishermen so they have a place to fish in the future. It's just ridiculous what's going on. I don't even know where to start. In fact, I can't. It's a little bit too emotional for me. Just sitting here and listening to all these people say it. They're afraid they're going to lose their jobs. Fishing treated me good. I fished for 45 years. And I look around and right now, as president of these two fishing groups, my biggest fear, the thing that I work the hardest for, is how we get our next generation of fishermen in the ocean, providing for our coastal communities. If we get any more divots in our fishing industry, we're gonna be painfully short on our next generation. Bowen has no threshold, no cumulative impacts. In our state, Washington, our fishing fleet has lost 50% of access to all fish. I heard the word access here earlier today. It's really important. We've already lost 50% of the access to all fishing crabs on 70% of the Washington coast. A lot of Oregon fishermen fish up that way, but not as much as they could. What happens, you lose that area up north, and come down here. I don't know how many boats from Westport bought Oregon crab permits, and they fish. They don't fish just here in Astoria. A lot of them fish clear down the coast. I know a lot of them fish out of Goose Bay. Some of them come and fish out of Newport. But that has been a tremendous impact on this state already. So you felt it. And I think about like the network accident in Garibaldi here a number of years back. I've actually got a video of that. I look at it, pull it out, look at it every once in a while. So that started crab season. The bar wasn't very hospitable, had a few breakers on it. One of my friends from Westport, had a 99-footer, was going up and down outside Garibaldi. This individual thought he had to go to work. Yeah, he went to work. All right, he lost his boat. 2 people lost their lives that day. You look at up and down the coast, you don't think about the fatality rate as a consequence of lost access to fish. You heard earlier today that a lot of fisheries are interconnected. Most people, they don't fish just crabs, they don't just fish trawl, they don't fish salmon. A lot of people fish multiple fisheries if they're gonna make a living in this business. And every time you hurt one section of that industry, it comes down to, well, I think I can make the tide if I stay just an extra hour. Make a little bit more money at the start of the season. Dungeness crab in Washington and Oregon has had the highest fatality rate of any occupation in the nation, period. Why? Loss of access to fish. And when this happens, like I said, 110 gigawatts, 110,000 gigawatts of energy are coming to the offshore, according to people that think they know. Every time a fisherman loses access to fish today, we've lost a lot of access. It's going to put more pressure on people across bars in the wintertime that they shouldn't be crossing. I know, I've been there before when I shouldn't have been. I knew I shouldn't have been. It's really kind of disheartening when a breaker comes over the bow, the pot falls off the stern, pot gets in the wheel, you're broadside to the incoming seats. Not a very good feeling. I've been there. Thankfully, Coast Guard was very close, and I can hail them when they were over there before we ended up like the Mary B in Newport with the house torn off. We got a rope on, so we got out of there. That's another thing that we've got to do here is I met with the Coast Guard here about 2 or 3 weeks ago. At 1st of June here, right here in Astoria, we're going to have, I hope we're going to have a meeting with the Toho people for crab companies. The Coast Guard, when I first heard about what they were thinking about, I was just frightened to death because they were going to federalize the tow lanes. Then we met with them for 2 or 3 hours and we talked with them. Their federal conversation turned more to traffic fairways. They started widening things. They were gonna put fairways on both sides of the tollway. The longer we talked about, pretty soon they said, well, maybe we can go from shore up to 12 miles with our traffic lanes. I said, maybe 20 is better. They said, well, we don't know if we can get to 20. So this is one of the things that if the Coast Guard is able to put these fairways in, or they're large, like from 0 to 12 or 15, or maybe a little further, there'll be no fixed structures in that area that will protect fishing. The Coast Guard can't protect fishing, but they can protect vessel traffic. And I think I did rock here a map of the vessel traffic in that paper someplace. But you can't see any ocean there. It's just solid vessel tracks. And those aren't all of them because not all of the smaller vessels, like the smaller crab vessels and salmon boats, aren't on that because they don't have DMS or AI. Those are just DMS and AIS tracks.
Thank you so much.
I'm hoping that we're able to get together with the Coast Guard. They're looking at putting a new 52-footer here at the mouth of Columbia. And I hope that I met with the College Committee here about 3 or 4 months ago to support that 52-footer. We're real happy to get a little extra support from it on that. So over the boats that fish out here in the wintertime, they'll appreciate that, and then 52-footer here, it won't be too long. And I would say within the next 2 years, that'll be happening here. They only built 4 of those in the nation. They're slow, but they're good wintertime rescue boats for things that we have going on here. It's just tough.
You've given your whole presentation to David Brock, right?
So I give him 10% of what I've been working.
You know, you want to start working on getting him even more.
Oh, my goodness.
Actually, I think you should make sure you submit it to Oregon Department of Energy
Yes.
before the 27th of May, for sure. Yes.
It won't be done by then, but I can submit.
Well, you can do what you've got.
But if you look at the statute, the Osceola statute, policy state right up front before this whole phone setup, it says the right to navigation and fishing therein shall not be affected. That's in the federal legislation. Gives both the authority to make this list. Now, what I want to know is how they're going to live up to that congressional policy that we have to make sure stays in place.
Well, that's part of what we have to remind them of.
So.
Thank you so much, sir. Really appreciate it.
I can talk you quite a bit long, but if you read that.
We know that, sir, but we need to move on.
You did have a time there, and I found out what it was.
I knew when you and I had the conversation before that you were a wealth of information, and I appreciate your being able to be here and share that with us. Did you have something you wanted to say, ma'am?
Didn't talk about the slide. It's going to be 75, 85 cents a kilo on that. Everybody can state.
I'm here from the government. I'm here. That's, they say that I've heard that most humor is grounded in truth. And I think President Reagan was quite a quipster, but and I think everybody's kind of laughed at that over the decades. But I think now, listening to these business people who work our resources, that strikes absolute terror in their hearts now. Because when the government shows up, it's another chink out of any income they can make. It's another rule, it's another fine. It's another fee, and it's a hike in the license. And when those words were spoken, I think, I haven't run the numbers, but I think if you look at the ratio between public employees and private industry people, especially farmers, fishermen, I suspect it's not here. And these people are the ones that they raise our food and they transport our goods. They do everything that makes this country run, and they're almost extinct. Now I'm going to tell you who I am. I'm a county commissioner in Pacific County. I am not a politician. I tell people that all the time. I wanted the job, you have to run to get it. And I wanted to do it so I could advocate for my county and my community. I have said at fisheries meetings that I believe they should have an endangered species list for fishermen. And I think there should be fishermen, oyster farmers, dairy farmers, they're all endangered. You can take a stab at it, and you can grow some corn or some potatoes or some beans in your backyard if you need to. You can't go out in the ocean and get fish. You know, you can't do any of that. And the process by which this is being done, Dale made us aware of this about 2 years ago. And we've tried to have meetings with departments, Washington State Department of Ecology and NOAA. And we have just run up against brick walls. What we are asking for is to have a seat at the table farther out than our 3 miles, so that these folks can be heard through us. And we're just not getting anywhere. I feel like it's my obligation to advocate for my folks and my community. And I think it goes up the line, those of you at the state level, I feel like it's your obligation to advocate for the rest of us at the federal level. And, you know, we tried the federal level, but, you know, we're kind of down here. And this is so hugely important. There are farmlands in the inland disappearing all the time. We need to turn that around, but we can't lose our oceans too. They are too important. They're the lifeblood of all of us. If our oceans get polluted, who's going to pay for that? If a fisherman's boat goes down, they get fined hugely because they polluted. What's going to happen when those wind turbines start to leak oil 30 miles offshore? You know, I mean, it doesn't take much imagination to think that probably not much. And who's going to clean it up when it all fails? Taxpayer dollars. We have to pay for something we didn't want, all of us, if you're opposed to it. I totally agree that we should be exploring alternative energies, but not at the cost of the people that make this country run, and not to the exclusion of everything that we depend on now, because we're not prepared. We haven't done the science. I don't believe it's going full throttle ahead because somebody in DC has decided, by God, we're going to have alternative energy. And it needs to be thought out and well done so it doesn't destroy us in the making. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak?
I would.
Well, I've got 2 of you. Heather, go
Okay.
ahead.
For people that don't know me, I'm Heather Mann from the Midwater Trawlers Cooperative, based in Newport. I represent 30 trawl vessels. They fish primarily for whiting and groundfish on the West Coast. I didn't know David Brocksmith until recently. When HB 3375 was passed, we did try to provide some comments, but because of the bureaucratic system, really weren't involved. But now that it has passed and the ODO process is moving forward and the bone process is moving forward, David's gotten to know me and others pretty well because we're pretty outspoken. And I want to thank David because I think in retrospect now that HB 3375 might be one of the ways that we are going to see some success in slowing this process down. 3375 is a bill which requires a study that looks at putting 3 gigawatts of energy in the ocean. What are the opportunities? What are the challenges? And that study results are due to the legislature on September 15th. I think after listening to the 3 stakeholder meetings that Odo has held, and those are available online, you can listen to the recordings and see the comments. The results of this study to an Oregon legislator should be crap. We need to slow down. This is scary. This isn't just fishermen saying not in my backyard, or I don't want this regulation. This is people that are coming from the environmental sector. There's marine scientists. There are so many people coming forward with concerns. Take fisheries out of it. And there are so many unknowns and risks with this energy and the expense of it, like Dale mentioned. It's a huge concern. We need to put the brakes on, and I'm confident that the results of this study are going to point directly to that. It's whether or not legislators have the courage to stand up and say, we need to slow this down and do this right and do it the Oregon way. And that's our job, is to help get them to see that. That everybody here and everybody that spoke and everybody online and all these listening sessions is talking to their family, their friends, getting people educated and knowing what's going on and reaching out and making those calls, sending emails. You don't even have to talk to someone, you can just email, but make your voice heard in the process. Because all the things that we've talked about and heard today are real. These are not just fears. We've seen what's happened in other places. We've got a fisherman here that has fished in the call areas 2 months of every season for several years. We have to prove to BOEM that we fish in those areas. So now we have to pull up our data, show our tracks where we've towed, just to prove that we've been there. They don't have to prove anything about what's going to happen with this turbine farm when it's in, how it's going to impact the marine environment, marine mammals, crab stocks, behavior, the transmission line. There is so much to think about here. The Port of Newport is poised tomorrow night to take up a resolution that outlines slowing down this process, taking a moratorium approach, demanding upfront EA analysis or EIS analysis. The process is ass backwards. There is so much money involved here. It's obscene, the amount of money. You're going to grant somebody a public resource for 30 years to the tune of, at least back east, it was $4.4 billion. But if you start looking at what we could lose from our natural resources, from fisheries over that same time frame, it's billions. It's billions of lost revenue to our coastal communities that are then going to be paying more for energy and can't afford it. Where's the social justice there? Where's underserved communities being served? The fish that we catch, the fish that my guys catch, whiting, that's going into school lunch programs all over the country. 1 in 6 kids in the United States is food insecure. Some only get their food, a healthy meal at school at lunch, and they're eating whiting or pollock. I mean, there is so much to consider here. So it's really about if legislators have the courage to look at the results of HB 3375 and say, this isn't the Oregon way. We need to figure out a different way. And the other night I asked BOEM in Coos Bay, if that happens, will you change your process? Will you slow down? They said the only reason they've gone down this road is because Oregon has shown an interest. And I'm assuming they're going to blame, Walter and all those guys on the task force for showing interest, which I don't think is a good representation regardless. They said that if Oregon were to change their position, they would have to reassess. I don't think there's any place in the country that BOEM has pushed forward a project where the state didn't welcome it. The other area I can think of is Maine, and they've gone a completely different route because the state of Maine didn't want to see it the way BOEM was providing it. BOEM has the discretion to move forward, But if the state comes out and says, based on the due diligence of HB 3375, this is a bad idea, and Bohm still goes forward, it's a huge black eye for Bohm. That's a PR nightmare. And it's just, it's possible, but I'm gonna do everything that I can that gets Oregon to change the way that they're going and figure out better ways to do this. And so some people might also be wondering, why do I get so many bites at the apple? And if you want that, just help organize listening sessions up and down the coast and you can get it. But no, really, I think it's really important, and I think that everybody needs to make their voice heard, because this is a big deal. Again, take fisheries out of it, it's a huge deal still. For anyone to say they have no concerns whatsoever with putting these gigantic wind turbine farms out there, I mean, there's something in it for every person to dislike, honestly, or be concerned about. So I just encourage you to continue to be engaged, but to talk to your family and other people about it. You know, in the Valley, seafood is dinner, right? If you live in the Valley, unless you're involved in the seafood industry, when you think about fish, you think, what's for dinner? But in coastal communities, fishing is the economic engine. It is the heart of what keeps our communities flourishing when other other industries are struggling. We need fishing. Recreational, commercial, support industries, all of it. And next time you're by a Little League game or something, look at who's sponsoring the teams. It's not offshore wind companies, it's fishing boats, all up and down the coast, sponsoring every sports team out there. That's all I have. Thanks.
Go ahead. I always dislike following Heather. For good reason. So I haven't actually given my personal comments at any of these yet, and I probably should do it here and not in my own district down south tomorrow. But I want, but I'm not going to have the federal delegations probably down in my neck of the woods tomorrow, and so that's why I wanted to put some comments on the record for our federal representatives in the room today. You know, I come from Port Orford, which roughly 35% of our community is based on those fishing dollars from that port, and that's new money coming in. I mean, and I probably arguably have more elected or appointed experience than any legislator in the state. Having been a city councilor and planning director and county commissioner and up through the ranks. And I found that the higher you get in government, the slower the wheels turn, except for this Bohm process. And I have dealt with various agencies, federal and state, when it comes to environmental impact statements, when it comes to wanting to, I mean, I had NOAA at my county commission door when I put a dam back on Flores Lake, and with their sidearms, because we had fish kill and algae blooms and so on and so forth. And yet, and we've heard from our trawlers, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but if you drag the bottom and that observer sees it, you're in trouble and you're paying some money. But yet these chains are going to be scouring the bottom. And there's nothing. That's normal practice for this activity. We have observers, not just with our trawl fisheries, but also with our rockfish fisheries and so forth. With but there's really no process for that when it comes to these offshore wind. And more importantly, when it comes to the EIS, we can't do anything moving forward without an environmental impact. And yet, as it's been mentioned before, that is at the end of this process. And it is wrong. And so I encourage our federal friends and colleagues that you really, really need to look at this BOEM process and how it is defined in federal legislation and give greater parameters around it. Because it's really not, well, it's not cohesive to anything else that I've ever dealt with. And this is new. I mean, I dealt with what Walter did talk about, how he's been part of this process for roughly 3 years, and you know, you give your input in good faith and you move forward, and then they say, okay, well, thanks for that, and then here's these call areas, but we're going to take the abandoned high spot out because we gave you something. Because I've dealt with that in the legislature all the time, unfortunately. But there really needs to be a better process when it comes to how folk can move forward. Because as Oregon and our federal delegation knows, the California current and the ecology that we have off of our coast for just the diversity and growth rates and the upwellings that it brings to our fishing industries are world renowned. And without the science and up front to figure out how this can impact that, it would be a mistake. And that's just aside from the engagement process and so forth and moving forward, that, you know, I know all of our colleagues here want the Oregon way and talk about it a lot. And this is not the Oregon way. So, thank you.
Is there anyone else who wants to weigh in? Mike.
Sorry, I am a shaky speaker, and I actually work upstairs at the gym, so I wasn't even really prepared to talk today. But I think that I am about the only person here in my age group that will talk. So I feel like it's just worth stating that as the next generation, of people who should be finding a way to sustain the lifestyle that you guys are living and providing with everybody, I believe that, well, number one, there's only one people. It's kind of sad that, you know, there isn't more representation here for people my age. But I go to Clatsop Community College. I am going to be going to Oregon State University next year. I am majoring in biology with an interest in marine science. And I actually did an internship in Port Orford when I was in high school. Oh my gosh, shaky speaker, sorry.
Redfish Rocks Community Team?
No, I did the gray whale foraging research.
With Tom Calvin.
Yep, and Lee Torres. And one of the biggest things I learned there is in the Pacific Coast Feeding Group, which is a gray whale feeding group only here in, I want to say, California, Oregon, and Washington. There's a population of 200, but in the summer months, there is 18 to 27,000 gray whales, which comes from Mexico and flow all the way to the Arctic. And something like this, if you don't know what the projection of the damage would be to gray whales, back whales, to anything in the environment. Somebody brought up upwelling, and I think that's a great point. Zooplankton and phytoplankton, that's a huge thing. A gray whale every day eats 1 ton of zooplankton. You know, it's like we don't know what the effects are going to be on our environment. I also want to know, talking about sustainability and future generations, my grandfather and my father, they always, you know, bring up, well, I remember when things were like this, you know, X, Y, Z, whatever it is. I don't want to tell my grandchildren, I remember when there were native species of salmon. I remember when there were actual populations of whales or any organism in our local waters entirely. I think that's, you know, a really big deal, and this is something that really should be thought of and curated and studied more before it goes through. So, thank you. Yeah, I just want to say that all of you here, I extremely support and respect everything that you do. I really think that anybody that believes that this is a good idea should think about where the food on their plate comes from. Thank you.
Yes, like when they say there's 2% of the population that's involved in agriculture and 100% of the people eat.
Yes, ma'am.
It's the same thing. Yes, thank you. We have one other online person that would like to speak.
Hi, Yelena, are you ready?
Yep, can you hear me?
Yep, go ahead.
All right. Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Yelena Novak. I am the director of the Oregon Trawl Commission, one of the 4 state commodity commissions for seafood products in Oregon. Our fishermen participate in several different fisheries: Oregon pink shrimp fishery, bottom trawl groundfish fishery in the West Coast groundfish, and the Pacific whiting fishery. The last 2 are federally managed, and pink shrimp is state managed fishery. All of our fisheries are sustainable. They're some of the best well-managed fisheries in the world, and I dare anyone to challenge me on that. I continuously do research. We're very proud with sustainability efforts in the industry. I'm sure many of you probably heard me say the really cool fact about Oregon pink shrimp fishery is the first shrimp fishery in the world that ever achieved the Marine Stewardship Council certification, and that was a while ago in 2007. And our groundfish fishery, certified with MSC, was and still is the most diverse fishery in the world to be ever certified, according to the Marine Stewardship Council. The concerns with offshore wind energy development are numerous. The list just keeps growing. The more studies come out, the more information we learn, the more research we do, the new issues come out, and very little information flow from BOEM, very little environmental studies that are available. And as you know, as many commenters mentioned, the lack of transparency in the processes, inadequate processes involved in BOEM planning and development. We are very concerned with our fishing grounds that we may be losing access to, and the way BOEM looks at the hotspots on their maps is quite inadequate. It's not just a hotspot where fish is, where fishermen go. It's also where they go because they want to avoid something else. And part of what makes our fisheries so sustainable is not just a great management practices, but also the information that supports decision-making through the surveys that will be impacted as well due to the loss of the survey grounds, but also the avoidance of bycatch species by fishermen. Again, great flexibility is required in the ocean space for that. The impacts we don't know yet, what exactly the impacts will be. What will be the impact to the radars and other safety at sea and Coast Guard operations? Is Coast Guard even prepared to assist the industrial scale of offshore wind production here of the West Coast in our weather? Do we have enough helos? Do we have enough Coast Guard boats to support that? The environmental concerns are it's just insane. It keeps growing. The EMF, electromagnetic field studies, continue to come out. The recent one I heard about the lobsters, the larvae that becomes deformed and its ability to swim is greatly reduced. That's of a big concern. The impacts to crab, and as other shellfish, for us, it would be Oregon pink shrimp. What would be the impacts to that? There is no information. And information that is available about impacts, it's hardly adequate. And BOEM admits that, yet it's unclear how they would act on that. Degradation of the habitat at best, and at worst destruction of natural habitat. The impacts to marine biodiversity, and it's very heartbreaking to see what's happening on the East Coast with Atlantic right whale. There is not many left, and that does not stop BOEM from doing what BOEM is doing. The upwelling, as was mentioned, our California current system here of our West Coast is one of the top 4 most productive upwelling systems around the world. That's what helps make our biodiversity so rich. And the fisheries are remarkable and healthy. That's part of the California current system that needs to be protected, yet it does not appear to be on the priority list for BOEM either. Many other impacts, and for example, the impacts to birds and the recent ruling of the federal charges of 4 counts of violation of the Migratory Bird Treaty Act, with Next Arab becoming sentenced with $8 million fine and some charges due to the killing of at least 150 bald eagles and golden eagles that are protected. It is concerning that it appears U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service was encouraging or recommending, I don't know what's the proper term here, this company to get the incidental take permit. That's the proper approach when there is potential impact to protected species. And that company completely ignored recommendation, and here we are. The big concern in my mind is the processes, how not transparent they are, not inclusive, convoluted, and almost intentionally convoluted, because otherwise it doesn't make sense. The information is not forthcoming, and the environmental studies that occur after leases are assigned to a private interest for more than a couple decades. It's nearly impossible to claw back those leases after the fact. After they're issued, it's pretty much a done deal. And I would like to point out the document on BOEM's website. It's called a Citizen's Guide to the BOEM's Renewable Energy Authorization Process from December 2016. It's brief. I will read a short paragraph. BOEM's leasing and plan review decisions are subject to NEPA review. BOEM requests public comment as part of the environmental review process, such as during scoping and during the preparation of environmental assessment or EIS, environmental impact statement. Pay attention. BOEM solicits feedback to 1, identify key issues to examine, 2, determine whether additional studies are necessary to inform BOEM's environmental reviews, and 3, and that's the one I would like you to pay attention to, determine whether to issue a lease and or approve a plan, and if so, which mitigation measures to include as lease stipulations or terms and conditions of plan approved. Did you hear any of these actually stating or reject? There is no rejection, even in the official BOEM's document. It's really, we lease the land to develop the energy. We will look at the environmental impacts and we will make it work. That's the approach. And that's not the Oregon approach. And this comes from the non-native Oregonian. I came to this state, I moved 12 years ago, and I was very proud of the fact how environmentally cautious and aware Oregonians are. And what is happening now, there is hardly any media attention to the issue. The impacts go way beyond than fishermen's livelihoods, which will be tremendously impacted. fish-independent jobs, ocean-dependent jobs, whether it's recreational, whale watching, the impacts will be here, the impacts to our quality of life in our coastal fishing communities. I'm wrapping up, Heather.
I was just gonna text you.
Okay, so the other item I wanted to bring to your awareness is the reliance on exemption 4 of FOIA, Freedom of Information Act. And exemption 4 is related to confidential information due to trade secrets or the proprietary information. Think about how fisheries operate, how transparent our fisheries are. If there is any environmental interest that does not like what fishermen do, they will not need to search and dig really hard to find exactly what's happening on the boats and what's happening in the water. Well, that will not be the case. Interestingly, so for example, 2 examples, typography, the site assessment process, when the lease is assigned and developer starts assessing the typography and stuff like that before they submit the construction and operation plan, the results of those surveys will not be public. BOEM will provide us with a summary, phrase, paraphrase, maybe it will be Kearns and West summarizing, I'm not clear, but we will not know exactly what's out there. Raw data will not be made available because it will be protected under exemption 4 of FOIA. The other example would be monitoring of the mortality. How many birds are being killed? So those data points also will not be available publicly because exemption 4 will be claimed. And the way it works, they will file the lawsuit. I don't know if you guys are paying attention to what's happening east side of the state with a Google data center. And the community members want to know, in the drought-driven environment of Columbia River up the gorge, how much water Google uses, which is a very heavy water usage industry for data centers. It's not disclosed. It won't be, because there was a lawsuit filed with exemption 4 and that data is protected. So when we will be looking at this industrial scale of our gorgeous coast with remarkably healthy, diverse fisheries, a lot of the seafood stays in the water, by the way, which is a great potential for the resilience of our communities as we're all becoming more impacted by the climate change. Lastly, I'm completely wrapping up. I promise, Heather, last point I would like to make is the food security and the role that the sustainable fisheries play in such security. In Oregon, we, the commercial fisheries, produce we are one of the top producing industries for the protein source. We also produce a lot of cattle, but cattle, aside from its environmental impacts, and I must say in Oregon, Pacific Northwest is way better than Midwest for cattle production. I came from Oregon Department of Ag, so random facts. However, all the cattle pretty much leaves the state for processing and then comes back. Much of the cattle leaves the country for processing and then comes back as beef. Is that climate conscious? I don't know. I don't think so. The water usage. So the wild seafood does not need any water. Okay, take that back. It takes a little bit of water. I am yet to get the actual number from processing, how much fresh water is used. We don't need feed that needs to be produced. Otherwise, we don't need that. Fish does not need to be fed, wild fish. Fertilizers, nothing. Arable land, no, we don't need it. So the impacts, I guess the positive impacts, effects of wild seafood in comparison to land-based foods are tremendous. So can please someone tell me what is the rationale behind taking out the sustainable fisheries under the climate scenario? I understand we're in a pickle situation worldwide. We need to reduce emissions. but is it wise to damage the food source in the world that relies on imports? I would like to close it out with just something, a homework for those interested. Consider looking up what's happening with water rights that are granted to farmers in Klamath River, Oregon, 15% of water available to farmers, which is next to nothing. Arizona, with the Colorado River, the historic low levels, which will impact our winter vegetables and fruits. And lastly, the Great Plains, the breadbasket region of the world and certainly of the United States, supplying about a quarter of our food. Those are being left without water, very little water. So what will it do to what we eat? Thank you.
And Yelena will be hosting the Brookings listening session on Wednesday, so you can hear more from her then. Thanks, Yelena.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
My name's Seth Whitson, and I'm a commercial fisherman. I just operate a boat out of Warrenton here. And, I'm also chairman of the Pacific Northwest Indigenous Crab Marketing Association here in Astoria. We have about 70 members own and operate commercial fishing vessels. I'd just like to appeal to the those of you that have votes in the legislature, say thank you first off for putting this together. We really appreciate it. A lot of fishermen couldn't be here because they're coaching little league games or out fishing, working, but nobody thinks this is a great idea. I don't have any other, I think everything's pretty been well covered by everybody here as far as the reasons why. And basically, I just wanted to say thanks for fighting for us. We appreciate it. So that's all.
Thank you. We'll be going on that too. So anyone else want to speak? Sure.
I'm with Congressman J.B. Herrera Butler out of the Caucus. So
get closer to the mic.
Anyways, I just wanted to say thanks for sharing your guys' story. I think it's very helpful. I know we've been kind of on the forefront. We sent a letter to Bo raising concerns, so we definitely are 100% on your side. And he was talking about legislation, so we're open to it. So if you want to talk to me afterwards on ideas on the path forward, I'm happy to do it. So anyway, I just wanted to introduce myself. Thanks for your time.
Thank you for being here. Because like it was pointed out so poignantly, this is not only an Oregon problem. This goes all up and down the coast. This is going to affect all of us. And that's why we've got to be ahead of the game. We've got to be leaders in the game, and we've got to be able to express our opinions eloquently enough that somebody's going to listen to us. And David is going to be putting together the document with all of the information that we have gathered here, and going forward with that, correct?
Not quite.
Not quite.
I will be drafting a letter for the Coastal Caucus.
The Coastal Caucus is ultimately going to be the group that is putting forth a letter with our concerns. And we are taking into consideration everything that has been said here and in the other listening sessions as well. And I just want to tell you how much I appreciate you all being here. This is very meaningful. It's very educational, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. Thank you. And you know that this has been 3 hours that has been riveting, and I appreciate it. And I appreciate all the folks that were here. Heather, Lori, David, thank you.
Thank you.